So, hey, Joe, Newton, let's go rob a bank.
I'm not too sure about that idea. I think that robbing is immoral and against the law, and I'm a nice little cowboy who just wants to book on a Bronco and drink some prohibited whiskey.
Well, I'm your older brother, and I think we should. And I should say we should.
I'm not gonna lie, you're not giving me the most convincing case that the bank should be robbed. Banks, they're they're the cornerstone of society, and I would struggle to get that in terms of my view on the world, robbing a bank.
Well, I think we should go rob a bank and think before, link later.
Yeah, you convinced me, and I think it's a good idea if we wear these light hats. Foreshadowing. Huh? What? Directed DVD. Hello and welcome to Think Before Linklater, the weekly podcast where we talk through Richard Linklater's filmography. Today we are talking about The Newton Boys. I watched this twice actually because it took us a while to record. You watched this in the early hours of the morning today. Maria's afraid to talk because she thinks she talked too much last episode, so I guess she's just going to be agreeing with me for the entire time. But
yeah, I definitely went overboard last episode, and with Newton Boys, I don't think I have a lot of opinions, so it works out that way, not on purpose necessarily.
So
Newton
Richard
Boys.
Richard Linklater, the thing that does interest me about him is there's no real through line to any of his films because you could say they've all got some kind of Texan connection, but then Before Sunrise is set in Vienna and
No.
Jesse's from Texas, and then they all have these kind of philosophical themes. Then this doesn't really have any philosophical
No,
themes
not
other
really.
than capitalism is
Uh-huh.
bad. And you ever think that the best way to rob a bank is to own a bank?
There were certain links and patterns we were seeing before. I think this one is a bit of a deviation, from his usual style.
Yeah, go on.
It's action. It's very like narrative based.
I think he's really bad at action sequences.
Yes, I will agree with that completely.
I don't think there's any
Although it
suspense
is
really
trying.
in the
No, not
action.
at all. In fact, I would say that although this is technically action, it's probably one of the most boring Linklater movies. It should be punchy, more edgy, but it's not. It's just almost like a comedy of an action.
Yeah, I mean
But
it's not a comedy though, is it? The one scene that's people fighting is when they do the robbery in Toronto, and even then,
Mhm.
most of the fighting is just like a guy jumps on someone else's back and they kind of toss a bit and try
Uh-huh.
and get him off
Uh-huh.
their back. Even
Yes.
the car chases are like they just drive away and then they're gone.
There's no moment where you're caught in the action of it, and when you're watching an action movie, you almost feel out of breath by just watching it. You know what I mean? Like you're in it, you're invested. These feel like I'm watching them from a distance because they feel so unrealistic.
We should talk about this is a Western. What's your experience with the genre?
Zero. I've watched maybe 3 or 4 westerns in my whole life, and I'm sure most of them were forced upon me by my father. So no, not really any experience with westerns.
My
Mm.
experience of Westerns is at the end of Back to the Future 2, there's a trailer for Back to the Future 3, which is the one where they go back to Western times.
Yeah.
I've not seen
So
Back
you
to the
haven't
Future
watched.
3, but I've seen the bit where they tease it at the end of 2.
No, I actually watched Back to the Future 3. And yes, it is a Western. I'm not sure if it's a good Western. Definitely not the best of the Back to the Future franchise, but technically that is one of the Westerns I have seen. And that one wasn't forced upon me by my dad. So there you go. I watched that voluntarily.
But no, I've never seen like I couldn't even really name the classic ones, like the Clint Eastwood
No,
ones, the good, the bad,
no,
and the
me.
ugly.
Mhm.
I guess I've seen some Tarantino that has a bit of Western influence. I played Red Dead Redemption 2. I was on acid. And I read Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy, but that's more of like scalp hunters in Mexico, so that's not this at all.
I watched, what's it called? The last Scorsese movie.
Killers of the Flower Moon.
Technically is kind of a Western as well, but I'm again not sure how much. I don't, again, what makes a Western a Western? Is it a cowboy in a cowboy hat? Is it the Wild Wild West? You know what I mean? Well, what truly is a Western? Because they start off as cowboys, but quickly turn into bank robbers. They start off in Texas, but they quickly move to Oklahoma and then to no longer in the Wild West. So what is truly Western?
I don't know, but this is a Western. I'm 85% sure.
Okay.
So plot-wise, Matthew McConaughey plays Willis Newton, who's just been released from prison, I think for some kind of minor crime that he claims he doesn't commit.
Yeah.
He's a bit disillusioned by that. He reunites with his brothers, and they decide to do a kind of really poorly thought out robbery in broad daylight, and they get away with these things called war bonds, which I tried to look up what they are, and I realized I know nothing about economics, so I think basically they're almost receipts that are given out by governments in wars to serve as money instead of real money to avoid crazy inflation in wartime. So they're not really money, but they are worth something. So they sell them to this bank manager. It's extremely convenient. He just gives them a list of 70 banks they can rob.
So I remember, Mela, let's start off with the first robbery. That was so stupid, right? Like they literally walked off on 3 horses in the broad daylight, thinking no one's going to run after them. And Matthew McConaughey is seen as not being captured by jumping in a shallow stream of water. And then we cut to nighttime and he has escaped. Like, how? They had guns and were in a car. How did they not see him in this shallow stream of water? Like,
I don't know if you can argue there are plot holes because it's based on a real story. But
true, but okay, but jumping in, that was such a silly escape.
I don't know how it worked back in the day because they do a lot of their robberies in cars, and presumably there was some equivalent of a number plate or something that you could use to track down a car. Like obviously there wasn't CCTV, but people would recognize the car.
But then they go to the bank to deposit these war bonds, and the banker allows for them to deposit the money knowing it's stolen, and hands them a list of, you should rob these banks, and the whole movie is based on this list. It's stupid. I'm not.
The idea is that he has some connections he's formed in prison that he's using, because there's the guy one of the Newton boys called Slim. He's in the first robbery and gets caught. I think he's maybe their connection.
The whole movie is based on this one sheet of paper. It's like being handed a treasure map. It's like, now the quest begins because this particular banker conveniently gave you a list of 45 banks to rob. Ta-da, movie start.
Presumably, because they all have a very similar kind of safe. They can only blow up safes that have square doors because that's how their explosive expert knows how to use the nitroglycerin. So I assume there was some kind of connection between the people who installed the safe and the guy who gave them the list.
We assume and we don't know, and it's very convenient.
Yeah, they're not very subtle. They're not very good bank robbers.
No.
So we should talk about the eponymous Newton boys. None of whom, by the way, look anything like their brothers of each other.
No. At the same time, they all seem like the same character.
Oh no, come on.
You know what they all have the same.
Come on now.
What is they're like carbon copies of each other. Matthew McConaughey being maybe the strongest personality, but then they're just a copy of the other until you reach the most blend of them. But I mean, how are they different from one another truly?
I will absolutely answer that question. Matthew McConaughey, he says to his younger brother Joe Newton, you're too scared to do these robberies, aren't you? Because he's a bit on the fence on it. He's like, it's It's not like I'm scared or nothing. I'll do the robberies. And that scene
Mm.
happens about 3 times in the film. Journey goes, guys, I think we should probably stop. And they're like,
Hmm.
I bet you're scared of Robin, aren't
Hmm.
you? That's why you don't want to do it. And he's like, I'm not scared of Robin. And then just immediately goes back to Robin. There's
Exactly.
very little conflict. Even the
It's true.
romantic subplot where Willis Sneedson sees a woman walking at a cigar stand and kind of looks at her. He just is kind of like, "Hey, girl, do you want to go out?" And she's like, "Well, I've got a kid." And he's like, "I love kids." And then they're just a couple.
And then she never questions any of his wrongdoings. There's no real
No, no,
conflict.
no.
Oh,
That's
she
not
just,
true either. There are a couple of
yes, but
scenes
barely.
where he comes back and she's still sitting up and she's like, I don't even know your real name. And he's like, you don't need to know my name, baby. You know me
Uh.
and I love you. And then everything's fine in their relationship again.
But
Yeah.
there's no conflict really. Or she just accepts everything he says to her. I mean, she introduced him to her son without knowing what he does for a living. And then the
Well,
first lie, like he gives her lies and she believes them, and she keeps believing him and she keeps believing him until the end.
two counterpoints there. A,
Hmm.
evolutionary psychology tells us that women are attracted to alphas with money and they're all gold diggers. And B,
Hmm.
he says he works in oil vaguely, so she kind of just believes that.
So, if we want to discuss evolutionary psychology, I can tell you yes, there is research to support that women tend to be attracted to providers, which means that yes, they tend to be masculine and resources. So, yes, I understand the initial attraction to evolutionary psychology. Kindness is a big factor when it comes to women picking mates, because ultimately it's not just whom I'm attracted to, but who's going to care for our offspring. And I would argue Willis is not the most caring or kind character. But I mean, ultimately, he gives her lies, like I work on an oil rig, or yes, this will be the last robbery, or whatever. And she just decides to believe him. Oh, that's what I'm saying. There's no real tension or conflict. Most women would be like, you're lying to me, fuck off, I don't want to talk to you again. But she was like, oh, okay. And then when she finds out, it's like, oh, you lied to me, but okay.
We are talking about essentially the only female character. I mean,
Yeah.
the explosive guy has a wife, but she's barely in it,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't even think she
Uh-huh.
knows what they do.
The one with the short blonde hair. What was her name?
Avis.
Avis, yes. So that's the only other female character.
But they're not
I keep saying, oh,
indistinguishable.
I'm not
Kind of.
saying they're not indistinguishable, but I'm saying like it's mostly about the four brothers, and there's not much character to them. They were lacking. I think this is the first time where we see Linklater not developing his characters fully like he usually does, at least the main ones. Because I mean, we've known him for completely using certain characters to drive the plot. At least usually the male protagonists are fleshed out.
Yeah, I get
Just
that.
because
The
like
one
Willis, let's talk about Willis. Like all we really get from the movie is his motivation to get rich, to avoid prison time, and how the past prison time affected him. But there's nothing else to him. There's no ulterior motivations, no passions, there's no personality except these two things. And he's literally the main character.
Yeah, I can't argue with that. And then
I
the other
liked how
two
high pitched.
Newton boys are Ethan Hawke and Vincent D'Onofrio. Ethan Hawke's
Mhm.
Jess Newton. His thing is basically he drinks a lot and plays the banjo. And Dot,
And
played by Vincent D'Onofrio. I like it. He has like little blade sunglasses. I liked his little blade sunglasses that he wears. But he doesn't really do anything apart from get shot at the end.
again, no personality, nothing.
And this
He
is a
barely does
2 hour
anything.
film, by the way.
Exactly, like 2 hours. And what happened? Nothing.
That was the first thing I wrote down was how many times more plot happens in this film than any other Richard Linklater film. This takes place over the course of like 5 years, and the others take place in
Yes.
one day, and yet
Mm-hmm.
so much less seems to happen.
Exactly. And even like locations, usually it's LinkLater, it's like either one location or few locations, or you know what I mean. They were traversing the entirety of North America, but what is truly happening? Nothing. Like,
Yeah, they even go
it
to
was like,
Toronto and it looks like Texas. I mean, I think it was shot in Texas, but it doesn't look any different really.
it could have been much more, but it didn't deliver
I
in
think
terms of.
you have to argue because this is the first big studio film
Mm-hmm.
Richard Linklater made. This is Fox. All the other ones have kind of been either his own production companies or smaller independent studios. But this is a $27 million studio movie,
Mm-hmm.
bankable stars. So it's kind of like, was he just
Mm-hmm.
a gun for hire, or is this actually a story that
Mm-hmm.
he was interested in telling and wanted to make? Because I'm not sure.
It doesn't feel like there is his drive behind it. They spent 27 million, but they made 10 million. So it lost a lot of money. It wasn't well received at the time. And I think even when if people are going for a Western, they want that action, they want the tension, the conflict, and this doesn't deliver on that level. If people were going for a Linklater movie where usually the plot is more muted, it's much more philosophical, then they would still be disappointed because this doesn't deliver on that level either.
Yeah, I feel like some
So,
studio executive was kind of smoking a cigar and he saw Richard Linklater had worked with Ethan Hawke and Matthew McConaughey and
mhm.
kind of discovered them, and both their careers were on the up. Ethan Hawke literally plays a character who's basically called Jesse James in Before Sunrise, and here he is Jesse James. They
Not the
went.
character, no, the characters are
Well,
different.
it's called Jess, and he's a
Yes,
robber,
I mean they have
but
the same name. One of the characters is called the Joe. Is he the same as you? No.
well, you say
Same name.
that. I might be doxing myself here, but Matthew McConaughey does literally play a character called Joe Cooper in one film. So
Is he the
from
same character as you though because he has the same name?
he's a serial killer in that film, so I hope not.
Okay, so
Um,
exactly. So names don't mean much. They're not the same characters at all. The different personality and a completely different movie. But I get what you mean. Like maybe he was roped in because they wanted Matthew McConaughey and Ethan Hawke to be in the same movie.
and
It kind of
he wasn't that influential a director at that point, so I think they kind of thought they
no.
could
It
bend
was,
him to their will and get him to do what they wanted to do.
and maybe also it was a budget thing. Like 20, I don't know at the time, but 27 million isn't an incredibly big budget for a Western. He's kind of known for being a small indie movie maker. So it could also be let's rope him in because he can do this stuff cheap. Why
Something
not?
I did want to talk
Because,
about is
mm-hmm.
this idea you see a lot in media, which is the idea of the gentleman gangster.
Explain.
I guess there's this idea that's been around for a while. You can maybe argue it started with The Godfather, been continued with stuff like Peaky Blinders, that there's a kind of code doing organized crime, and you can be quite cool. You don't hurt vulnerable people. You only hurt other people who are in gangs and big companies and corporations, and that makes it
Mm-hmm.
quite like an aspirational thing, something that seems quite appealing. And this film definitely ties into that trope. It's difficult to say
Yeah.
because there's this idea that the victors write history, right? So these guys did end up living quite a long time and basically telling their own stories. And they say, we never killed anyone, we never hurt any women or children. We only robbed from
Mm-hmm.
banks. They do pistol whip people. They do hit people. They do shoot people.
Yes. Yeah, first of all, I would argue it's a narrative that has been way established way before The Godfather or any of those things.
Okay,
I mean,
okay, okay, okay.
it's better. The criminal who has a moral code. There are plenty of older versions of that. But anyway, but I think these things are always where do you draw the line and what defines as morally okay but legally not okay? Because in this movie, they often mention how, oh, the banks have insurance. So actually, no one's losing any money. But in the meantime, you wonder, like, what's happening to the insurance companies if they're having to pay up all the money, and because probably the CEOs in the companies are fine, but what about the entry-level office worker who's now his salary can't go up because of all these? I'm sure it's affecting people in different ways. It could be
Yeah.
traumatizing the security guard because he was tied up all night and because of the robbery. So I mean, it's not a clear-cut moral area. It's very gray, and I think it's them justifying their own decisions.
And I don't think the film's interested in having that conversation
No,
about
no,
whether they're doing is right or not.
yeah,
It's just
no.
banks are evil. These
Mm-hmm.
guys are good. They're not doing anything wrong, really. I think
Mm-hmm.
there are points as
It's
well where they
explained multiple times.
say the banks are exaggerating how much they've stolen in order to kind of get more money from the insurance companies.
As a sort of also the bank is doing their own part to rob the system. I agree. I mean, it's multiple times that these things are mentioned, but it's never truly discussed. There's no conversation on the morality of things. And Joe is the one character that stops a bit sometimes to question these things, but he's immediately shut down. That's why the movie feels so like nothing's happening, because it's just one sequence after the other without really ever having the time to process or digest or break down those things that are happening. It feels very one-dimensional.
It's just bland men do crime for 2 hours and they get
And
away with it.
can we also acknowledge they're really not great criminals or robbers? It's like, how are they managing to rob all of these banks where they're all idiots? Like, because there's no, again, the movie doesn't give us any realistic planning or subterfuge, or it's like, it's so bland. Everything feels unprepared, unplanned, it's just happening. And they just managed to go through with it. At that point, I was wondering, like, I would rob banks if that was it's so easy. Like, I don't know if it was something that was that easy at the time, but there was never a moment, usually with a good action movie, and even these money heists or robberies, like, there is a big chunk of the movie dedicated to how good of robbers they are, the planning, the escaping, you know what I mean. But here we have four brothers who are idiots that just show up, rob a bank, and then they leave, even when they did the hold up. So they were like, oh, there are 4 bags of money. Let's just point guns at people and they'll drop the bag. And it was like, I felt like I was watching Mr. Bean at that point. It's like,
When the people in
it's
the
like
apartment start throwing like pots and
throwing
stuff
shit.
at
Yes.
them.
And someone was hanging onto his leg. Like, what are we doing? This is not action. This is a comedy skit.
No, you're right. And when they do their
That's why I
final
mentioned comedy.
final train robbery, Joe Newton is
Mhm.
standing there and they've all gone away and it's just him and like 15 people and they're kind of going to each other. We could just rush him and he wouldn't do shit really. And he's like, yeah, I'll shoot the 3 of you if you take me. But you don't really believe him.
And then the one guy they shoot is just one of them. Like, okay, we know. I mean, it's pretty evident how the movie is going to progress, is that they are going to eventually escalate to actually killing someone. But then, like, it's so stupid again. The one person they shoot is one of their own.
Well,
Have-
they have a great plan. In my favorite line in the movie, one of them says, I think it's a good idea if we wear these light hats because it will be
Mhm.
dark. Which is
So
it's a great plan. And maybe a little bit of foreshadowing. Because then one of them isn't wearing the light hat and he gets shot.
yeah, is it a great plan if one of them either it's blown away by the wind or forgets to wear it, or I don't know what happened. Like,
No, I think that's up there with all time great movie quotes. Say hello to my little friend. I think it's a good idea if we wear these light hats. They're both of equal standing.
anyway.
The fashion is kind of interesting. I think
Hmm.
if we're talking about positive things about the film, which I guess we
Yeah.
should do, it does there's this kind of sepia Instagram filter of everything that makes it seem like the
Yes, definitely.
1920s. It's a period piece, definitely. There's nothing that makes you
Yes.
think this was made in 98. It's accurate in seeming like it took place in the time that it's supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
So production design wise, it's
Yes.
good. I don't think any of the actors are bad, other than the
No, no, no.
explosives expert, but he is a country
Uh-huh.
singer, primarily not an actor.
Yes, and I would also question the character. I feel like that character in particular, you constantly question what, first of all, why he's here. Like it could have easily been killed off early on, and it would have been probably nicer if it was just a family thing.
Well, he's the
But
explosives
also,
guy. He's the only reason they're able to do any of the stuff they do.
I get it, but I would also question how good of an explosive guy he is.
He's just got a bottle of nitroglycerin, basically.
First of all, and I'm not a chemistry expert, so please correct me if I'm wrong. Should you store nitroglycerin under your bed?
I don't know, but they seem pretty happy about it.
Apparently, but I mean, I wouldn't anyway. And then it's like, okay, he prepares the bomb in the bank. Like, is there no way to create a bomb that you just light up at the bank? No planning whatsoever. I just saw show up and create it there and then. And how many times did they explode a bank? They didn't just explode the bank door. They exploded the entire literal bank. That's literal burning money. What are we doing?
I don't know enough about bank robbing. All I know is the best way to rob a bank is to own a bank, if you know what I mean. I think Mr. Bean is a good description for their bank robbing techniques. There's a bit, the first one, where an old woman comes out and
Yes,
what does
oh
he
my
say
God,
to
the
her?
best
He's
one.
like, "Oh, we're just doing some repairs," and she's
So
like,
repairs the
At
hand. She
2
goes, no.
a.m., you're doing repairs. At 2 a.m., I've got a fire siren. I'm going to go off.
and he's like, "I'm gonna
And he's
shoot
like,
you."
don't you dare, don't you dare. And of course, she still turns it on, wakes up the whole neighborhood.
So acting wise, they're not really given a lot to do. They're all
No,
capable.
there are no deep emotional breakdowns of anyone. There's no big monologues. It's just very one-dimensional characters, and I think they all do a good job of it, including the female protagonist. I should mention, I think I liked her acting, but I mean, no real stretch when it comes to acting chops.
I don't know. Vincent D'Onofrio was pretty good at looking sad after he got shot and he had his arm in a sling. I believe that he was pretty upset that he got shot.
I would be upset if I got shot.
Especially if it's by your explosives guy.
Yes, you had one job to do, not shoot one of you.
It's all because he forgot to wear those light hats. It's an important line.
Like, of course, build the whole safety plan on a object that easily flies off. Like, not light shirt.
Well, they were
I
also
don't know,
wearing
light.
overalls, I think, weren't they? They had like grey overalls on.
Yeah, so couldn't that be the like let's stick to the gray. If someone is wearing a gray overall, don't shoot him because no one can take off a gray overall
It's
during
ridiculous. I don't know what
but
you're talking about. I think it's a good idea if we wear these light hats. Iconic line, movie history. I think it's a good idea if we wear these light hats and also some overalls. No, that's not going in any
okay.
quote books. That no one's gonna remember that.
Sure. Yeah, and everyone quotes the light hats quote. I've heard that plenty of times in my life.
Lots of references to it and sketches and stuff, parodies of it. Oh, it's iconic.
And this was adapted by a book, right? From a book.
Yeah, adapted from a book, kind of based on the real story.
And at the same time, it was written for the screen by the author, by Richard Linklater, and a third person.
Yeah, I don't know how much when they do stuff like that, the author just gets an automatic credit because it's an adaptation, and how much input they actually would have had into the screenplay.
Exactly. And also how much Linklater was involved in the writing, if he was one of three. It doesn't feel very him at all. Not in the writing, not in the directorial choices. So I'm wondering if how much he was actually involved in those decision making.
Did you hate Jess
Also,
Newton? Because Jess Newton's kind of the buff of the film. He is just a drunken idiot, basically.
no, I didn't hate him. I mean, I get what he was. They were all too blend for me to like or dislike. That is the honest truth.
Well, he's especially stupid because he gets
Yes,
arrested because he runs away to Mexico, then he comes back because someone bets him that he can't ride a horse and not get bucked off it. And then
Mhm.
he comes back to America to do that. And then they do have a small amount of money that they get away with, but he gets drunk with a taxi driver and buries it and then forgets where he's buried it, so they
Yes,
don't have it
yeah.
anymore.
And when you realize that this has actually happened, like these are actual people and they committed these robberies, and was it in real life this stupid? Like how, or was it a translation onto the screen that made everything seem less unreal? But apparently, the 35,000 that were buried never made it. They were never found. So I guess they were stupid in real life too. So
Yeah, but I think they also wouldn't have said if they had found it, would they? Because then I'd have to give it back. So some kind of unreliable narrator going on there.
maybe true.
Jess Newton is kind of a performer, and they all kind of became celebrities based off of this in a way. And he only got 9 months, which was the lightest sentence, basically, because he was just a bit of a scamp, and he was making everyone in the courtroom laugh. So they gave him a light sentence.
So his charisma, I mean, his friendly nature, I don't know what you want to call it, he got off lightly on a lot of occasions. The fact that he was basically barely helping his brothers because he was always drunk, he never saved up any money, he wasn't really devising any plans. He just showed up, did what he said that was told. He seemed to be doing quite well. I mean, I think his charm got him through a lot of things in life.
Well, it helps that the guy who gives them the tip off about the train robbery is possibly the most suspicious person I have ever seen in cinema. Like he's introduced in this speakeasy because this all happens during Prohibition. It's never really mentioned. It
It
does.
is mentioned at one point
I said never
when
really mentioned. It's not a major plot point, but
has something to do with like why are we here and not bootlegging? And bootlegging happened because of the prohibition.
they say we don't kill people, we don't hurt women and children, we don't rat, but they do rat on this
Yeah,
guy who's
all the
not part
time.
of the family, suspicious snitch guy who's always looks like he's kind of slightly sweating and a bit
Yeah.
uncomfortable. The FBI agent takes him to a room where there's a peephole that you can see into the room where they saw all the money in, and he looks through it and he goes, I wonder who made this. And the FBI goes, it seems to be right at your eye level. And he's like, I wonder where that is. So he basically incriminates
Yeah.
himself and he gets
Uh-huh.
13 years, which is
Yeah.
almost longer
Say
than all of what
them
the Newton
combined.
boys got combined.
Yes. And he
They
barely did anything. So
the explosives guy gets 4 years, Doc gets 5 years, McConaughey gets 4 years, Joe gets a year and a day, and Jess gets 9 months. So considering they basically spent 5 years living a life of luxury and then went on to be celebrities and back to their regular old lives as cowboys afterwards, they did pretty well out of it, really.
I mean, almost this movie glorifies those kinds of options. Or like, if I'm going to, might as well do it. So it's not like I'm going to get a lot of consequence. In fact, I'll probably get a movie out of it.
I'm going to go on Johnny Carson. So what, you're saying this film convinced you to be a bank robber?
It didn't convince me to be a bank robber, but it definitely made bank robbing seem very easy to do. As I mean, in those times, doesn't require a lot of IQ to do it. And afterwards, like I can, but a year of prison after thousands and millions of dollars, like okay. Not too bad. Maybe the life of crime is okay. It definitely, I mean, realistically speaking, it doesn't dissuade you from this lifestyle. It's like there's no discussion about the morality of it or how bad it is or the impact on people or even the impact on them. They seem to have I've gotten out of it pretty okay, and they went on to have very full lives. Willis stays with what's her name until they die. They all live to die of an old age or die of natural causes. A movie is made about their lives. It's like it doesn't really dissuade you or gives the movie a tint of all of this was really horrible, really bad. No one should do it.
In fact, Vincent D'Onofrio's character Doc, it says he actually goes back to crime and gets arrested at the age of 77 for trying to do another robbery.
True, I forgot about him, yes. But
So-
again, he lived until 77. I wouldn't complain if I lived until
Well, no, he
77.
lived past that. He died in a nursing home at 83 or something. Definitely romanticizes the cowboy lifestyle and the bank robber lifestyle.
Which, I mean, romanticize is a hard word in this movie. I mean,
I thought it was
It's-
very
it's-
romantic. More romantic
Yeah,
than
yeah.
Wuthering Heights.
it's not a very romantic movie. It doesn't really push for anything. It's too one-dimensional to be anything, let's be honest. It's not poetic in any way or shape or form.
There's some relationship drama after the Toronto robbery. She's like, I thought we were just going to Canada to have a holiday and you're out here robbing banks. And he's like,
He's such
Yeah.
an idiot.
don't worry, baby. And he pulls her into a bath, I think, fully clothed. And then the scene just cuts away, like, end of that conflict, I guess. And
And
he
then-
tries
and
to
then
go
Jake-
straight. He tries to go straight, Maria. He
sure.
tries to make an oil rig, but he's not cut out for it. He
Yeah,
names
so he
his
has
names
to
his
go with-
oil rig after his, well, not his wife, but his long-term girlfriend. How cute is that? Would you fall for someone if they named an oil rig after you?
Sure, of course. If they gave me maybe the profits from the oil rig, but
He
it's
doesn't
just
make
the
any
name,
profits.
no. And also at the end, like she showed up kind of to save him by bringing the money.
Yeah, she sticks with him. He's got
Okay,
moves.
I like that.
He named a failing oil rig after her. And
Yep, that is love.
straight from IMDb trivia, the guy who he talks to in the oil rig, he tells him that it's failing because everyone's already taken all the oil. That's Matthew
Okay.
McConaughey's brother playing that character,
Interesting.
whose name is Rooster. His name is not actually
No, it's
Rooster,
not.
but he goes by
I
Rooster.
can imagine. But I can imagine. Yeah, I can imagine that Matthew McConaughey's brother's nickname is Rooster. They seem like that kind of family.
What are you trying to say? He's not written.
Did you know that Woody Harrelson and Matthew McConaughey might be related, according to them?
I think that's probably one of those bullshit things. I don't believe that.
Okay, so they mentioned that Matthew McConaughey's mom had an affair with Woody Harrelson's dad before Matthew was born. So there is a chance that this is what they said, okay? Matthew McConaughey and Woody Harrelson said it on live TV. It's public knowledge out there. There's no confirmation, but it's a story they are willing to share.
I think you'd immediately get DNA tested if that was the possibility. I don't think it would be a up in the air thing.
I mean, that's up to them. Well, I'm sure that if they wanted to do the DNA test, they could afford it.
Yeah.
But maybe it's an anecdotal story that they like to share. So if they believe it or not, that's up to them. But again,
Yeah, that's why
you
I'm
don't
saying it's a
take my word.
press thing. I
Yeah,
believe
it could be a guest thing, but it's also a funny press thing. From all the other stories we hear, that's a good one. And I know how much you like those two together.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, no.
I'm not doing the impression. I don't know if you're trying to key me up on that, but I'm not doing it.
I was. Anything to not talk about this movie.
So if we talk about where they were in their careers, they're up and coming stars, basically. McConaughey, Dazed and Confused, obviously, was probably the biggest thing he'd been in before this. He was in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 4, which they didn't release because it was so bad, but then he became popular, so they released it because Matthew McConaughey was in it.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Fun fact for you.
I'm not sure it's fun, but it is a fact.
It's an alright Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie. Not my favorite
And
horror.
what about Ethan Hawke?
Again, I think
I haven't seen it.
he was up and coming. He'd done bits and pieces, and he was starting to build up quite a profile.
But then I wonder, did this movie change their career in any which way? I don't know. I mean, I know the reviews were mixed. It didn't do great, didn't make a lot of money. But was it popular? Was it a popular movie? Or like was it one of those movies that no one really saw?
It's just kind of a black hole of pop culture, I think. It released, it happened, and then everyone just moved on with their lives.
Which is probably great for their career because it wasn't going to give them any like real positive spins. They weren't brilliant in it because the script didn't allow for them to be brilliant in it.
I reckon
So,
it probably sold all right for like reruns on TV. Like if you
mm,
put this on in like
yeah.
a Sunday afternoon when you've just had a roast
you,
dinner and you're kind of napping a bit, you'd be like,
yeah.
this is passable. This
Yeah,
is
and it was,
staves off entropy for 2 hours.
yeah, especially if you're like a white male above 50.
I didn't enjoy this movie, by the way, so that's not an insult to me.
No, you're not above 50 to my knowledge. No, I'm
Hmm.
talking about like, like dads and grandpas. Those people would like it on a Sunday afternoon after roasted dinner. It's the kind of movie they would watch. My grandpa was a kind of man that used to put the MGM channel on from day to night and never question any of the choices. And most of them were westerns. So
Maybe that's a new podcast we could do. Watch a film with your grandparent, and then we can have them on as
no, this
guests.
was that would be cute. Except I'm talking about the other grandpa who died, unfortunately. So it would be a seance kind of podcast. And then Nonno Peter, who is he's alive, doesn't really watch a lot of movies because he doesn't understand English. He's Maltese through and through.
Well, westerns are often made by Italians.
Yeah,
Spaghetti westerns.
spaghetti westerns, yep. But he still doesn't understand it.
Okay. Well,
He's
that's
just
even
talking,
better.
okay?
They just go
We
purely
translate.
visually. I'm sure we could
Mm.
find subtitles. We can make it work. There's money in this idea.
I'll discuss it with him. What else about this movie can we add?
I think I've written this down
Okay.
for most of the Richard Linklater films. I like the bits with the cars, and I didn't even hear the car chases were terrible, so I don't know why I wrote that.
I think I like the cars, full stop. I like those old-timey big cars.
Yeah, with the suicide
They do.
doors, the suicide doors.
What are suicide doors?
They're doors that open from the back hinge, and not the front hinge,
Ah, okay. Why are
They're-
they called suicide doors?
because you're much more likely to die if you get hit by them for some reason. If you get
Okay.
in a car crash with those kind of doors, you're more likely to die. Would you
Okay.
like me to research? This is
No,
your
it's
one,
fine.
this
I
is
would read- I would
your
take
one
it.
fact check per podcast. I googled suicide doors and it's recommending that I go to the Samaritans.
Okay, let's not ruin your search history then.
A suicide door is an automobile door hinged at the rear rather than the front. Such doors were originally used on horse-drawn carriages, but are rarely found in modern vehicles, primarily because they are less safe than a front hinge door. Being
Okay.
rear hinged, if the vehicle were moving and the door opened, aerodynamic drag would force the door open, and the driver-passenger would have to lean forward and out of the vehicle to close it. Imagine.
Oh, okay. Like I'm literally crashing, my door opens and I have to reach out and try to close it rather than just slam the brake.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense. I thought it was because if you got hit while you were standing in the door, it would be more deadly. But no, it's
No, it's
you.
because what if it opens? I can't close it if it opens.
I guess the doors didn't stay shut back then, and it's
Oh my
quite
God, this
it's
is
quite
crying.
a tragic image. But imagining someone driving and trying to shut the door and like reaching out of the car and falling
Yeah,
out.
like, just stop the car and close the door.
Well,
That is the least suicide door.
It's the worst way to commit suicide. How embarrassed would you be before sending some pizza at the gates of heaven?
Stop. This is so
How did you die? I
problematic.
hung myself. How did you die? I was trying to shut a door and I fell out of my car and ran myself over.
Because it didn't come to me to stop the car. I just wanted to keep driving.
Take your time. Start over again, Bob.
Humphrey, what are you saying?
What are you saying, Jack?
What are you saying, Squad?
What do you say?
So a couple of other things I wanted to mention. Do you think they look believable in these period costumes? Because sometimes I look at Matthew McConaughey in like these 1920s suits and his combed over, greased haircut, and
Yes.
it kind of seems a bit out of place.
No, I think it's true. So there are moments where, like, especially Matthew McConaughey, he seems too tanned in a fake way to be a
Yeah, no,
cowboy.
yeah,
Like,
I guess it's
they're also like never truly dirty.
yeah.
Like if you're
Well,
robbing a bank and
they're rich, so they can
like
afford.
their clothes look dirty. No, I'm talking about maybe the earlier scenes or when they're on the trains. Like if you're riding a horse for hours, you should look a mess. And usually their clothes look dirty, but their hair, their face looks completely clean. Again, this was a different time period. People didn't shower all day, every day. But maybe it's also I'm trying really hard to hate. I'm not trying. It's so easy to hate this movie that I can't find one good thing about.
Did you catch the save the cat moment? This is the part of the podcast where I mansplain film terms to you. But
It's not mansplaining if I actually don't know, okay?
there's quite a
What
famous
probably is mansplaining in this episode was you giving me evolution psychology.
That was a joke. That was
Okay.
that was a joke.
Yeah, I know.
I
I know it
don't
was a joke. Yes, I know it was a joke. But that is the closest you come to mansplaining if you give me psychology theories, like to an actual psychologist. So that is the closest you come to mansplaining. Otherwise, you don't mansplain. It adds to
disclaimer.
the conversation.
The whole ideas of alphas and omegas isn't really based in anything and is kind of used by meninists and men's rights activists on the internet to enforce ideology that's quite right-wing dog whistling and radicalizes young males in a way that is very problematic for society. Suicide isn't funny.
So why the disclaimer? You didn't need to do that. I actually argued your point because there is validity in certain theories. It's just they're very redundant. But anyway, the disclaimer wasn't needed. I knew it was a joke. Continue.
I can see those kinds of people, men's rights people being into a film like this and the whole gentleman gangster thing, I guess. It's seen as a cool,
Okay.
manly thing to like break down
Yes.
systems and fuck capitalism.
And it's also, let's be very realistic, this movie has literally no emotional substance to it. So I don't want to go into men versus women on this, but I mean, it's hard to make women like this kind of movie if there's no je ne sais quoi, or I don't know how to say it, but you know what I mean? Like, it's a very one-dimensional kind of thing. It's lacking. I don't know what kind of, I mean, people want those very direct plot lines with not a lot of twists and turns or no, as I said, emotional substance to it, then yes, that could include those.
I don't know. I got rock hard when they were like, "How much is $1 million?" And Matthew McConaughey pops open his 6-barrel revolver and spins it around and goes, "That many zeros."
They said one and then this many zeros.
Yeah.
You are so rock hard, you barely understood what he was saying.
That was pretty cool.
But Matthew McConaughey is Matthew McConaughey. He can't really ever be not good.
Yeah, even in Dazed and Confused, where he's kind of like a predator, he still is somehow sort
I
of
wonder
cool.
if there was. I wonder if he ever did a character where he wasn't cool. He's one of those actors that his persona walks into the room before he does.
Well, this is a very specific reference, but I'm thinking of Jamie Foxx in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. He plays like a nerdy scientist, and they give him like the worst haircut and like buck teeth and try and make him out to be a nerd, but it's like, come on, that's Jamie Foxx. He's a cool guy. I guess every film where there's like a extremely attractive woman and they like put her hair up and give her glasses and no makeup and then transformer halfway through the film.
It's like she takes off her glasses and suddenly people are, she's actually pretty. Oh my God, yes, that is a trope.
And I've
That
never
is a
seen
trope.
it, but there was this, I saw a trailer once for this film called Beastly, I think it's called. And it's like
Oh,
this
you're
guy,
mentioning.
the guy he's covered in like scars, but he's a very attractive, muscled man, but he's just like
Yeah.
got a bit of scarring on
I,
him. And the concept of the film is like, how could someone possibly love him? It's like he's hot as
so,
fuck, man. Like I love him
Mela.
and I'm straight.
So reality is, I don't know how did you come across this movie? It was predominantly made for 13-year-old girls, and it was so horrible that I don't know how it crossed over to you knowing about it. But it was basically a reimagining of Beauty and the Beast. That's why it was called Beastly. And the Beast was basically this hot actor covered in scars, or I don't know what. And I hate that I had actually watched it, so I know what's going on. Because I was a 13-year-old girl when it came out.
Hey
I
man,
was an idiot, I watched it.
we've all been a 13-year-old girl at some point in our lives. So we have to
You're not
rate we have
worthy to be.
we have to rate it.
Is this how we're going to end things with Beastly? Can I add one last point? Because if we're
No,
going to
we're
mention
finishing on Beastly.
no, but I mentioned like if I'm going to acknowledge my 13-year-old girl self, I need to also acknowledge that on Suburbia and this movie, Catherine Hardwicke was the production designer.
Okay.
So I don't know if you've ever heard of Catherine Hardwicke, but she's quite a good director, except for the fact that she also directed Twilight.
I don't know, man. That baseball scene in Twilight still holds up.
Yep. So she directed the first one. She did other good movies, okay? Like 13 was a brilliant movie, but it was nice seeing her production. Oh, she was also up and coming at the time. So my 13-year-old self was happy again. Anyway,
Yeah, I don't know if the 13-year-old version of me would have enjoyed this. The 27-year-old version of me didn't enjoy this.
my 31-year-old self or my 13-year-old self would have said it's bullshit.
I guess that's not in the Thinker Thinker sales, so you're not allowed to say that.
No.
But
Okay.
this,
Everybody else gives.
the opening's quite cool. That kind of drew me in a bit. I mean, it is probably the most obvious on the nose way you could open it.
I was going to
This-
say like the old timey intro with the piano and the black and white.
Yeah, but
No,
there's a
that
bit
was
there's a bit of flair. There's a bit of style as opposed to the
as
rest
soon
of
as
it.
it started, I immediately was disappointed because again, it was like too on the nose, too one-dimensional. I was like, was this necessary? Yes, I get it. It's a Western, but so I hate it. Sorry.
This might be
I'm
the
sorry.
first time we both agreed on something. I mean,
Yeah,
we
I
both
guess.
liked Before Sunrise. You just loved
I
it,
I
and I
liked it exactly.
thought it was a pretty good film. But yeah, this is a stinker. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
it is.
I'm sorry, Richard
is.
Linklater. I don't know if you wanted to make this. I don't know if a studio gave you a lot of money so you could finance things that you actually wanted to do in the future, so you accepted it, and that's why you did it. It didn't feel from the
maybe it was
heart or genuine.
maybe
It was 2 hours long, but nothing really happened. All your films, I think, could probably be about half an hour shorter. This could be an hour shorter. So yeah.
No, I would also say stinker, and I agree with almost everything you said, except I'm not sorry. There are no redeeming. I mean, I'm sorry. There are no redeeming qualities to this. The few things we mentioned that were positive were bare minimum. Okay, like okay, it's a Western, so the costume is accurate. Wow. So I'm not sorry that I didn't like it. I think it was made for me not to like it.
I just remembered all the times Ethan Hawke played the banjo, and so I retract my apology as well. I hate this film.
I think we just offended every banjo player out because all of them are, of course, listening to our podcast. The Venn diagram of those two, like
It's
podcast listeners and
it's just
banjo players.
just a concentric circle, yeah.
Exactly.
I don't know. The other thing that pisses me off is when men light cigarettes for women. I don't know why. I don't know why that's ever a thing. Like, women can light their own cigarettes, man.
Yeah, women can have their own entire lives without men, but apparently in most of Linklater's movies, it's like a woman only has a life if she's at the side of a man. So that's just one of the many actions. Now you're noticing the cigarette, which is interesting, quite symbolic. You know what is one good thing about this movie? That it was a Western where no Native Americans died.
Yeah, there's only one Native American character at the start, isn't there? He like
Yes, and
the he
the Osage millionaire.
sends them over a brandy.
And in fact, the only racist comment was on him being drunk and like they'll drink anything. But at least there was no shooting of any Native Americans in this movie.
That's true. And the only black characters are either like staff at a hotel, like maids at a hotel, or shoe shiners. But that's accurate to the time, so you can't really complain about that.
I guess.
I didn't actually explain what saving the cat was. We just went off on a tangent. It's something that the hero does, the protagonist does at the start of a film that shows that they're a good person and they're worthy of being the protagonist. And then it's called that because the classic example is they save a cat. But Matthew McConaughey has that moment at the start where he walks past the orphans playing the violin and singing, and he puts some money in their charity case. And it's like a little character touch at the start to go, hey, this guy's not that bad, even though he might be a robber. He's still a decent guy. I thought that was
I think again it's
not necessary.
No, it wasn't necessary because like there's no effort in the script, but also the plot of like trying to empathize with his character, or because there's no need for us to take any sides. We just watch the movie unfold, so it wasn't necessary.
It was at least
reaffirmation.
An attempt to make him seem like he wasn't a terrible person.
And again, it goes with those discussions of, but we're not the real villains, the banks and the insurance money and the capitalism is. But again, it's not a real discussion on morality.
Yeah, and the best way to rob a bank is to own one. And
how many times are you going to say it?
No matter how many books you read, you're never going to plow a field.
I was waiting for you to mention it.
We need catchphrases. All the best podcasts have catchphrases. Next time, I'm going to organically slip in the line. I think it's a good idea if we wear these light hats.
Light hats?
Yeah.
What's the next one? What's the next movie?
I believe it is called Waking Life. Would you like to know anything else about it?
Depends on what.
It is rotoscoped, which basically means you take actual footage of people and you kind of put drawings almost over them, so it's animated, but it's based on existing footage. You trace over the real thing, which I quite like as a technique. There's a really good show called Undone. That's a really good TV show that uses that technique that came out quite recently, and it's basically, I think if we are going for the idea that this was a big studio film, directors often have this thing that they do one for them and then one for the studio to make money, and then one for them. So this seems very much like Richard Linklater taking the money and saying, well, I did your big studio film, now I'm going to do my film. It apparently contains lots of references to his older films. Jesse and Selena in it.
So you're trying to entice me about it, but I am sure. I told you last time, I always go in it with optimism.
You're saying the optimism left you the second you saw the silent movie intro.
No, it didn't leave me. It comes back. I saw it start. It usually, yes. For this time, it's definitely left pretty early on. But then by the time I'm watching the next movie, I always begin with optimism again. It's a survival skill, so stinker for both of us, but looking forward to the next one.
Yeah, it looks interesting. I'm kind of ready for a bit of philosophy and existentialism after this very black and white, clear-cut, traditional studio narrative.
Also, I don't watch a lot of animation, so
I've been watching way too much anime, but that's a topic for another conversation.
Probably the next one.
No, it's not anime, is it?
Okay.
If Richard Linklater made an anime, that would be something.
No, not anime, animation.
Hmm.
Hmm,
Hmm.
hmm,
Hmm.
hmm,
Hmm.
hmm. Do we do
Cool.
the skit now? Because this feels like we're dwindling.
Okay.